Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight as Black Public and POV, a conversation with Clint Smith and CJ Hunt. My name is Ebony Johnson, and I serve as the engagement manager for Black Public Media. It's a pleasure to be amongst everyone this evening. 2021 has been a trying year through the difficulties of COVID-19 and expounding socioeconomic political turmoil of dissonant opinion and truth. Anti racism, white supremacy, and equity continue to grab headlines as forces that would silence our nation's difficult histories resist efforts to reckon with that truth. For more than four decades, Black public media has worked to support creatives and media makers who seek truth as they give voice to the stories and often untold that are often untold or downcast. With that in mind, this evening we are honored to host with comedian, filmmaker, producer CJ Hunt and New York Times bestselling author Clint Smith in discussion about CJ's award-winning new documentary, The Neutral Ground. The film follows CJ as he attempts to film the removal of Confederate monument in New Orleans. With that removal is when that removal is halted by death threats, CJ sets out to uncover why an army of losers from 1865 still have so much power in America. Without further ado, let me introduce CJ. CJ Hunt has worked as a film producer for Comedy Central, The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Down with Robin Thede. Documentary The Neutral Ground premiered at Tribeca Film Festival last June, where it received special jury mention for the Albert Malaise Award of Best New Documentary Director. The film has been nominated for Best Narration in the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards and Best Score in the IDA Awards. CJ is a fellow with Firelight Media and New America. He has recently was recently selected member of DOC's NYC 40 under 40. Let me bring on CJ. Welcome, CJ.
Thanks, Ebony. Welcome to you. Thank you for that great intro.
Of course, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, I love that intro of the phrase dissonant opinion and truth. I just love that that's a fancy word for like people don't believe in facts anymore. So thank you to Black Public Media and to POV for even giving us this time. This is gonna be a treat. I Folks have seen the movie, and that'll be a treat for you. If you haven't seen the movie, it'll also be a treat for you, and we'll be showing you little parts of it. And most importantly, it'll be a treat because we are in convo with somebody who I deeply respect and whose work. I think makes such a good pairing with the film. Clint Smith is a staff writer at The Atlantic. He's the author of the narrative nonfiction book How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America, which was a #1 New York Times bestseller and was selected by the New York Times Book Review as one of the 10 best books of 2021. He's also the author of the poetry collection Counting Descent, which won the 2017 Literary Award for Best Poetry Book from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association and was a finalist for the NAACP Image Award. Clint has received fellowships from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, New America, the Emerson Collective, the Art for Justice Fund, Cave Canem, and the National Science Foundation. I met Clint because we are both 2019 New America Fellows. And the feeling of meeting Clint was really wild because we were going around sharing what our projects are. And Clint's project was literally naming places that I was filming at the time. And the idea that I did not run into this brother out there as we are at the Whitney or as we are talking to neo-Confederates is a wonder to me, and his book is a gift to us all. Please clap loudly by yourself in your home for Clint Smith III.
What's up, man? I
What's
appreciate
up,
that very
Clint?
generous introduction.
Of course, of course. It's good to see you. Your bookshelf is looking great. Your glasses are looking great.
You got Toni Morrison in the back, so I feel
Oh,
how many books you I know no matter how many books you put up, you can't beat that. So
thank you. Thank you. Good
I also
eye.
need to get some succulents. Everybody, I see all these people with their
You know,
2 years in, they have their plants and stuff.
I
And I'm
need some
getting
vines,
get some plants or
I need
some
some
vines.
vines.
It really changes the game.
I gotta this is such a nerd uh Zoom note. Your books are lit up well, bro.
They lit up well.
They're lit
It
up
took me a while to
well.
figure out the ring light situation
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with the glasses and you
Yes.
never know. But here we are. I feel like
Here we are.
a decent setting. I got a 9 out of 10 on Room Raiders on Twitter, and
Great. I'm
so
glad.
I feel like if you're on a 10-point scale, that's an A.
Folks,
So
this is a preview of the depth of conversation that we're going to be having tonight. It's going to be about Zoom setups and how to properly light bookshelves. If you've come to talk about reckoning and slavery and public memory, that's not this conversation. We're going to be talking specifically about lighting books. Thank you
you
for
got to
coming.
reckon with this square.
Yes.
But I think we should start by giving people a sense of what this project is about of yours.
Great.
This project that I love so much and that I can't say enough good things about. But I think for context for folks who might be entering without having viewed it, maybe we should watch the trailer first.
Great. Let's do it.
It is amazing in 2015, I'm fighting Robert E. Lee. It's almost hilarious. Those statues never should have been erected. The South lost.
Let's take down statutes and put them in a place of proper remembrance, not reverence.
4 monuments to the Confederacy are set to come down in New Orleans.
The vote is considered one of the most sweeping moves by a U.S. city to cut ties with Confederate history.
But that's not what happened.
That's not what happened.
Backlash over a plan to remove these prominent monuments has led to death threats, intimidation, and even the intentional torching of a contractor's Lamborghini.
Out here at the Jeff Davis is extremely chaotic right now.
We cannot have reconciliation without truth.
Okay. Here we go.
This, for me, is the closest we can get to the actual Confederacy.
Somebody is going to abuse any institution.
People don't always take objects well.
Right.
Including when that object is a person.
Including when it's a person.
We have intentionally misrepresented this history to our own citizens on purpose.
These people who are really bigoted, I bet we could just change their minds.
Why do you think that?
I don't know, because
Why do you hold that hope out, that illusion?
These stories are coming out. So I think we're in a different portal of time that these things are not going to be swept under the rug any longer.
Man, I love that. I love seeing it all over again.
Yeah. I love that quote from Luther Gray, who I'm sure you've interviewed before too, but he's in New Orleans. And I love that quote that he says, "We are in a different portal of time now." And he that interview happened, I think, in 2017 or 18. So it's not like he's like, well, the George Floyd era, but that phrasing of we are in a different portal of time, and these stories aren't going to be swept out of the rug anymore, and the idea that these stories are just coming out, it's such a poetic phrasing. I really love it.
It really is beautiful. And I'm wondering if you can help ground us in like the origin story of this project. Like, when did it begin? Because some might look at this and think that, oh, this is something that you began recently, or after George Floyd, or after, or even that you were thinking about just when the monuments started coming down in my hometown, and a town that is so central to your, and in many ways your hometown now. When did you start thinking about this project? And talk to us about one of the most interesting things about your project is its evolution, and like what it began as versus what it became.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make a documentary. I moved to New Orleans in 2007, and I'd been there 8 years by the time the monuments controversy was getting the type of attention that there was actually a window where the mayor had said, okay, let's take these down. right? New Orleanians have been calling for the removal of these monuments since they were erected. Like you can even look back in the 70s and see NAACP Youth Council, and you can see Marie Galatas and Avery Alexander and all these iconic Black New Orleanians out in the streets in these articles, calling for the removal of these monuments. You can even see the KKK marching in support of these monuments in the 70s. So it's not a new conversation, but in the light of the Charleston massacre in 2015, when white violence gets high enough and Main Street enough, all of a sudden there are these windows of consensus. It feels like a door in an attic is opening, and a little bit of light is shining through. And it feels like when that happens, we're like, let's try to do as much as we can while the light is coming through the door. So in New Orleans, Take 'Em Down NOLA had already been calling for the removal of these monuments. Mitch Landrieu, our white mayor, heard that call and was like, okay, let me use my power to try to get these things down. I was watching that and I wasn't trying to make a documentary about this. I wasn't like, ooh, what is this stirring historical context? I was just like, I want to make jokes roasting the old white uptown folks who are coming out and saying these monuments are history. If you move them, we're all going to forget who they are. And also the war wasn't about slavery. And also the first Black man, the first slavery was invented by a Black man. Like once these folks started getting going at the city council meeting, the sort of veil of propriety that sometimes white supremacy wears, it's like, oop, the veil is gone. And people are just out there saying the wildest things, right? Saying, these people are saying these monuments are oppression, but that's not real oppression. You see it in the opening of the film, right? We have a montage in the beginning of the film of this tumultuous meeting, and you have old white folks saying what they're saying is not oppression. Real oppression is when thugs beat up a tourist in the French Quarter, right? So to me, I view racists like a kid views like fireflies, right? Like a kid will be like, oh my God, these are out in this number. It's so bright. I have to get something to catch this. And for me, the film was a way to catch it and to hold it up and be like, let's talk about what's in here. Let's talk about like the hyperbolic reactions of why in a city where objects move all the time, right? Like when I was working for the public defender, I'd look down out the window and we'd see whole neighborhoods being moved to make space for the hospitals. And in a place where things move all the time, all of a sudden people want to act like when you move a slaver monument across town, that's somehow destroying all of our history. So it started with me trying to roast that perspective. At the time, I wasn't watching documentary. I was just watching a lot of late night field pieces from The Daily Show and Full Frontal with Sam B and Wyatt Cenac's show. So all my visual language was like, get out there with a mic and come up with some jokes on an iPad and read the jokes and talk to people and catch hypocrisy. And from that point, the film starts becoming something bigger, right? That pretty soon it's discovered that the contractors are run off the job by death threats and a burning car. And the removal itself is halted because of lawsuits, even though the city has democratically decided to do this. So it moves from being this almost, hungry to be late night, trying to be viral YouTube clip into actually being like, dang, how did we get here? And how hard are some people going to fight to hold on to these monuments?
And what's interesting too for me is the way that there's a sort of tonal evolution throughout through the arc of the piece, right? Where I think you come in, as you mentioned, with the intention of, doing this. Who does this now? Like Kepler, like Jordan Kepler goes out here and like talks to the ridiculous people and like reveals how ridiculous they are by just asking pretty like forthright questions. And it begins as that. But what's most compelling to me in the arc of the film is the way that you discover that it needs to be something else, right? And like, and it is both the evolution. You are capturing the dynamics of like the absurdity of these city council hearings, but as you go into different places, the tenor shifts and the tone shifts, and there's a level of humor is still like ever present throughout it, but there's also a sense of earnestness, right? And I think that we've talked about how that's something you were wrestling with, both in the editing, in the filming, in the shaping of the narrative, like how to find that balance between the humor, which I think is so important to this film, and like gives it a different sort of texture than any other intervention that is, speaking to this space in the sort of ecosystem of contributions to public memory. This is doing something very different than my book, doing something very different than the public historians and docents out there. How were you thinking about and wrestling with like the balance between humor and earnestness, and like using humor to capture things that are both absurd but also incredibly violent and dangerous? And it comes across so well because you're so good at what you do, but it is, I can imagine, like a delicate balance and a sort of a difficult needle to thread.
Yeah, I mean, when you were becoming a poet and gaining acclaim, were there poets that you were trying to be like, and then you were like,
oh yeah,
oh wait, I gotta stop trying to sound like this?
Yeah, you're looking on YouTube and you're just like imitating people you hear until you figure it out for yourself.
I think it's the same thing with comedy, right? That all of our first attempts, I think, are trying to regurgitate something that you've seen before. And Jordan Klepper, Roy Wood Jr., like those are some of the greats who have ever been in field pieces, right? Their ability to grab a microphone and go put it in someone's face and get gold from it. I think 2015 me was really hungry to be that. And it's almost like athletes about it, like learning, like my muscles aren't the same, right? That if this was a TV show on late night, the goal would be to be getting as many slam dunks as possible with like a lot of sick burns and really, dunking on folks. And there are moments that I'm dunking and I'm fighting with the editor to be like, that is a solid joke. Like we need to put that in there. When he's saying that the slaves couldn't go to San Francisco if they wanted, and I'm doing a run about how great San Francisco was and all great rep and all the slaves wanted to go there rather than be in slavery. I'm like, that's a fun run. And having had a job on TV, I'm like, we would put that in. But in the edit, I think the question became, if you have 82 minutes with me, what are we doing besides dunking on folks who want to say out loud that slavery was not a bad time?
Yeah.
What makes someone want to stick with a story for 82 minutes besides seeing white supremacists roasted? And for me, it became about, okay, when you talk to somebody and the first words out of their mouth are, okay, this was about states' rights, it's only a matter of time before they say slavery wasn't that bad. And in between, they will also hit the same points of, Lee freed his slaves and every major civilization has had slavery. So after we were sort of going in and trying to roast folks, it was like, why do the people that we're trying to roast all say the same four things in the same order, right? Like, why in different states are people saying the exact same thing? Why does it feel like a script, and where do those script points come from? And that's when we started like doing the work that felt unsexy at the time, which is just like straight up Ken Burns style, or a better example would be Stanley Nelson style, just like straight up historical documentary. Right. And when we were going into it, like that did not feel like that was going to hit. Like that did not feel like the type of movie that I wanted to make. I wanted to make something fast and punchy and funny, and being like, well, let's just dig in to see where a historical myth comes from that felt kind of like a high wire act, or like, is that going to be boring? Are people going to want to know about deep research about documents. But in the end, that's the part that I actually like feel the proudest of. Like that's the part that you can take into classrooms and kids rock with, and is actual myth busting, and is a different type of dunk. It's like a long form dunk.
Yeah. Can we play that section on
Yeah,
on the documents? Because I love, shout out to primary source documents.
Shout out to the librarians in the chat.
Shout out to the archives, man. But I do think it makes it this really powerful pedagogical and educational tool.
Great.
So let's see that part.
Thanks.
Okay. Here we go.
To consult the document, I went to the capital of the Confederacy. Richmond, Virginia has a whole avenue just for Confederate monuments, and for some reason, African-American tennis legend Arthur Ashe.
Y'all could have put me on any other street.
Richmond also has a museum that examines the Civil War from all sides.
So what caused the Civil War?
Was it fought over who had the most power, the states or the federal government?
Or was it simply a fight over money in different cultures? Or was it slavery? One that matches what you think was the main cause of the Civil War.
Looking at the secession documents, each of the documents, they all tie back to the institution of slavery. They just do.
Is thoroughly identified with the institution of the greatest material interest of the world.
Louisiana looks to the formation of a confederacy to preserve the blessings of African slavery.
Now, to be fair, the secessionists also talked about their rights. They were just incredibly specific.
Yield to us our constitutional rights in relation to slave property.
They refuse to recognize our right of property in slaves.
Rights of property in said slaves shall not be thereby impaired.
Property in slaves.
And nobody was clearer than Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy. What Stephens wanted most, besides just a little bit of water, was for everyone to understand exactly what the Confederacy was built on.
Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man. That slavery is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth.
I mean, they are exceptionally clear.
The founding documents of the Confederacy talk so obsessively about slavery. The real mystery is how so many people came to believe that Confederate symbols have nothing to do with it.
Man, it is, I'm just thinking of like a 15-year-old version of me seeing that and like getting so much clarity about the statues and the iconography that were the landscape of my city. And also like falling out of my chair laughing at the idea that Alexander Stephens really just needed some water and some
those ashy lips. He's got those ashy lips.
But it's just so powerful. I mean, this is something I do in my book also.
I know because I got the Louisiana Secession Commissioner from your book.
Oh snap! Look at that! Look at that symbiosis.
Yeah, you're like, so you stole it? So you're saying on the
no,
line,
we're like the rhino. I watched so many nature documentaries.
The rhino and the bird.
The rhino and the bird and the whale and the little fish and we're just like.
But all of these examples have extreme size and power differences.
But maybe I think you are I don't know who the rhino or the whale is.
I'll be the bird. They need each other.
The point is,
good. They need each other. No, I mean that to say that like your book is so it is so. I can't describe how wild it is to know you and to have known you at the process that my film was coming out and your book was coming out, because being like, oh, there's another person in the trenches, but essentially sorting through so much of the same stuff. So your section in your book where you are giving the receipts plays like this section too of I love seeing the selects that you go to. And we were in the edit, like everyone at home, just whenever someone challenges you on this, just tell them to Google secession documents. And if they are paying more attention, tell them to Google Declaration of Causes, right? All of these Southern states had their individual sort of like Declaration of Independence where they're like, all right, here's why we're leaving. And number one reason on all of them is like, well, now list our reasons. Slavery, 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 slavery.
I mean, it's just, it is so striking when you like read all of these declarations of secession, and they're just like, I mean, they're not vague about it at all.
No.
Right? Like there's nothing unclear. Mississippi in 1861, as you said, our position is thoroughly aligned with the institution of slavery, the greatest
material wealth in the world. Yes.
I mean, like, how much more explicit can you? This man, Alexander Stephens, was like, the cornerstone of our new nation is the idea that slavery is the natural and normal condition of Black people.
I love when they elaborate too. I love when they elaborate when they're like slavery, like the servitude of the Negro to the master race. You know, like in all of these, Texas is real specific too. Every time it talks about slavery, it like will specify it as like that the Negro is in servitude to the white man. Yeah. And yes, they are not hiding it at all. And we spend most of our time teaching this film in classes. And what young people say all the time is, you know, like I'll have a lesson and be like, okay, if we're trying to myth bust this idea that the war wasn't about slavery, let's look at each one of these receipts. And does this receipt help us? And so many kids have said the exact same words, which is just like, is the dude literally saying it?
So, I mean, it's what's wild for me to think about. I think about this all the time. And that's in so many ways, the reason I wrote this book is to understand and excavate so much of the history that I didn't receive when I was a kid. And I think about how, you know, reading these secession documents and reading about Robert E. Lee and reading about Jefferson Davis, reading all these things, just like I should have been learning this in my 8th grade social studies class. I don't know why did it take me until I was an adult who was engaging in a specific project to understand this history, to begin to uncover so many of these documents that should be central to the way that we teach any history course. And, you know, our projects are both out in the world in this moment where, you know, the critical race theory boogeyman is omnipresent in our political discourse. And for, you know, I'd love to hear how you're thinking about it. For me, you know, critical race theory is this umbrella term that is used to describe any part of history specifically, but not singularly, most often, but not singularly Black history, that makes people feel uncomfortable or calls into question the story of America that they have been told and that they hold on to. And so what has happened is that since the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, let's say, you know, almost a decade ago now, if we think about its beginning with Trayvon Martin, then moving to Mike Brown, then Eric Gardner, then later Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery in 2020, there's been a profound shift in public consciousness in which there are more projects like ours. There's more films, there's more documentaries, there's more journalism, there's more books, there's more YouTube videos, there's more content that whose entrance into the space is made possible by the work that activists and organizers and folks like Take 'Em Down NOLA have been doing on the ground for all these years, that then enter the discourse and create a shift in public consciousness that allows people to understand racism not just as an interpersonal phenomenon, but as a systemic one, as a historical one, right? Embedded into the foundation of this country. And so you have millions of people who now understand the story of this country differently. And what that does, I think, is create an existential sense of fear.
It's a different portal in time.
A different portal in time where their sense of who they believe themselves to be in the world is inextricably linked to a story that many other people are realizing is no longer true, or was only part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of what both of our projects are trying to do is to both insert create another contribution to the way that we understand history and public memory, and to build on the work that so many incredible scholars and activists and public historians have done, and sort of offer our drop in the bucket, but also to like chronicle the way that this shift has happened, right? Like to document, like, well, how do we remember what we remember, and what does that look like? What is it like? How are you thinking about having this out in the world in the midst of the sort of CRT boogeyman times?
I mean, I would also say that it's not only chronicling how we remember, right? How we get myths, how not me growing up in Massachusetts, not you growing up in Louisiana, none of the students that we've been talking to in 20 classrooms so far this year, the reason that none of us ever studied the founding documents of the one nation that broke away from America, right? Like, I think our work is questioning how we remember, but I also am, in the face of actual bans against teaching this hard history, I also think these projects are about anchoring what we can. It's almost like the house is on fire and we're like, save what you can, grab grandma's blanket, we are literally pinning down the things that governors are trying to erase with legislation. So I'll give you a really specific example of me and my impact producer, Courtney Staten, who's an amazing filmmaker and organizer, and we spend all of our day thinking about how to get into schools. A main conversation that we've been having to have with teachers is, are you protected? We're coming to teach the film next week at 11:15 a.m. Are you protected? That it's almost like we're talking like, do you have a gun? Or like it's prohibition times, right? Like, do you have a place to hide the liquor? But what we're asking is, hey, we're teaching your class in Tennessee, and Tennessee has a law on the books banning any discussion of history that makes students feel guilt, discomfort, or shame. Tennessee has a law on the books that bans any conversation of structural racism in classroom and implicit bias, which, side note, it's like, if we can't teach kids that race comes from our structure, racism lives in our structures and lives in our hearts, like, where are we supposed to teach them that it is?
Yeah.
But these laws exist in 12 states so far, literally making it so that teachers can be fired for teaching for talking about white supremacy with students. This is happening. And in Tennessee, they charge up to $5 million of per pupil funding for one of these violations. We've taught the film in Tennessee. So if someone were to go back and report on the teacher, that teacher could be fired and the school could be fined up to $5 million. So for us, it's not only like the personal of what a weird dystopian world we're living in, having to ask teachers if they have the institutional protection to possibly violate a law in teaching the very film that, we've been showing you clips of. But it's also this larger thing about being like, if there's a system in place now where public schools that serve predominantly students of color are being fined per pupil funding and stripped of their teachers, just public schools, like, what does that look like system-wide, right? Like, how is that not a violation of the 14th Amendment? How is that not the next Brown v. Board if only public schools that serve Black and brown kids are being robbed of their money and their teachers for teaching those kids their own history? That's the sort of like stakes for us in what we're focusing on with the film and what we try to talk to students about. We talk to them specifically about these critical race theory laws and bans when we're teaching the film in schools.
And it's just so ridiculous because neither of our projects and the vast majority of teachers are not attempting to indoctrinate students with a set of political beliefs. In fact, the insidiousness of white supremacy is that it attempts to turn empirical statements into ideological ones, right? So you go into a classroom like that and say, the Confederacy was a treasonous territory that raised an army predicated on maintaining and expanding the institution of slavery. Some people would think of that as like you attempting to indoctrinate students with your political.
They're like, why are you bringing your politics in? It's like, I'm just reading the documents they wrote.
Reading the documents. And that's the thing. I mean, that's why that section of your film is so important, because it's just like, I'm actually not saying anything. This is just some actors reading the words that these people said for themselves. And I think, when I think of Jefferson, when I think of Washington, when I think of our founders, Jefferson, Washington, Madison, when I think of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and not to conflate those groups of people because they are fundamentally different. But I just think of like, you can't study Jefferson, as I talk about in the book. You can't only study Declaration of Independence Jefferson. You also have to study Notes on the State of Virginia Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just study the Jefferson who's the philosopher and the statesman and the scientist. You have to study Jefferson, who was the enslaver, over 600 people over the course of his lifetime, including 4 of his own children. And I think that there's a profound difference between presenting students with a fuller plate of information with which to make sense of the world around them than attempting to tell students what they should believe. And most teachers aren't doing that. Most teachers are saying, actually, you've only heard part of the story. Let's make sure you hear the full thing. The other thing that I'm thinking about is the way that you incorporate your family into the project. That was something that was really important for me. My grandparents were a part of my book. The epilogue is sort of centered on interviews with them and thinking about their proximity to this history. And something you did that I loved was include conversations you had with your own dad. Can we play one of those? I feel like I have the magic finger. Can we play one of those? Let's hit it.
Play clip 375.
Growing up Black and Filipino, I've always been deeply fascinated by the dynamics of race.
No. There was a time in your life when you didn't even know you were Black.
Okay, but basically from that point on, I think I've been very interested in.
No, not even that. There was a point after that when you denied that you were Black and did everything you could to change yourself into appearing to be white.
But after that, I was very interested in race and being Black, I would say.
No, not even then.
Basically after that.
Well, long time after that.
It was like a steady progression.
At Milton?
Yeah, in high school.
All-white school?
It's not an all-white school.
Predominantly white school.
Okay.
Overwhelmingly white school of rich, preppy kids. And
Some of us thinking deeply about race.
Well, that's not true. When I came to your school as a guest on Martin Luther King Day and talked about lynching,
Let's pause for a second.
You were horrified.
Let's just pause for a second. What would be an appropriate topic for Martin Luther King Day speech? The triumph of diversity, civil rights. You came to my school and told all the white kids that family had probably lynched someone.
Yeah. I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand because you didn't understand you were Black. So I had to force this.
But it's something.
On you. Shock you into thinking.
It's something.
You were Black, accept your Blackness, see the history of your Blackness, see what these white people have done to us.
That's it. I don't think it was about showing me that I was Black. It was about showing me about the violence of white supremacy.
Yeah.
And the lie about erasing it.
Right.
That the thing that you would get most animated about is not that this happened, but this happened and nobody talks about it.
And nobody's willing to talk about it, which is why I talked about it at your Martin Luther King Day celebration.
Evan, you can stop the clip there.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, stop on Aunt Jemima. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
That's my dad. Why was that important for you to have your dad in there?
It wasn't important for me. That was feedback that I got from, remember, I just wanted to be funny on camera, right? Like, I just wanted to joke about people who are white supremacists but call themselves preservationists, or who drove in from out of town, who, to tell New Orleanians what to do with their own monuments.
Yeah.
But when I first showed the first cut of this to a lot of my POC filmmaker friends in this fellowship called Firelight Media, their first reactions was, this is funny, but also what even is this? Like, what is this film? Because it looks like it's just you reading a bunch of iPad jokes to neo-Confederates. And I don't even know what we're watching. And my response to them was, oh, okay, well, my character has an Obama-esque level of hope that we can all compromise. And by exploring avenues of compromise, we see how uncompromising even, liberal white folks are around memory and how uneducated we are. And their feedback was, I am not interested in a character, right? Like nobody wants to watch a character for 82 minutes. If you are doing documentary, they actually want to watch something real and they want to find out something real about you. So why are you so into white supremacy? Why are you chasing these white supremacists around? Yeah. And my answer to them was, it's just always been in a convo in my house, right? Like my dad gave me these photo books of lynchings when I was in middle school. It's, we had a thick folder of all these printouts that he would give me of, things about Amadou Diallo and Abner Louima and all these police shootings, right? Like it was my dad cramming race and conversations about white supremacy on me, who had blonde hair and was like not trying to talk about race. And explaining that, folks at Firelight and my producer Darcy were like, hey, I think that that's something. I think you should follow that. And to me, that was just like a new style of storytelling and a level of vulnerability that I did not want, because I'm like, no, I'm just here. My jokes are pushing outward. We are putting the lens on other people. It's not about talking about me not feeling black enough or having grown my hair to look like white kid hair or having never read the things that my dad was putting on my stairs so that I could learn about race. And, thank God they pushed me to go home and film with him, because I think the film really put us on a different path to be like, you're like, reckoning is personal, right? Like you're going to have to be sorting through some stuff in you if you're asking America to be sorting through whatever myths it's hung up onto.
It's interesting because, for me, I similarly am a character in how the word is passed, right? Like I couldn't even imagine a version where I'm not placing myself within it, because so much of what I saw happening both felt so personal, and I think that there's value. And I think this comes across in your project, even though you didn't intend it in the initial version, it very much comes across in the final version of you being this, like, we are on a journey with you, right? And I wanted the reader to feel like they were on a journey with me, because I am meeting these people. I am trying to, trying to figure out, trying to learn a lot of the history that I wish I had learned, 15, 20 years ago. And I wanted it to feel like people were not being, like it wasn't didactic, or it wasn't preachy, and I wasn't making like caricatures out of people, but that it was like, you're on this journey with me, learning about these things, meeting these people, and I think that creates a different level of intimacy with
I think it's two things, right? Like, I think just from a narrative point of view, okay, author, filmmaker is going to stand in for the experience of the viewer. I think that's like just structural, but actually exploring what your own history is, like, brings it to the level of skin in the game. Right. That that it's not just you are going to see me in these spaces talking to these people. It is like, before we even get a movie going about how hung up our national story is on these set of myths, and how most of us have based our identities on things that are not true. Before I'm like going and pointing the finger, I felt the same hesitation you did about, like, how do I not be didactic? How do I not be condescending? How do I, as someone who grew up in the North, not make a film that's like, see, Southerners, here's what you need to do, right? So I think that scene for me is working in the first 12 minutes of the film because I'm dunking on myself, right? I'm like, as someone who's always been interested and fascinated by race, and my dad's like, boy, you didn't know you were black, right? Like
That's absolutely it. Yeah.
It's a self-own that I think opens up the audience then to be like, dang, yeah, I lie to myself as well.
Yeah, man, that's I didn't even put it together in that way, but that moment is so important because it just, I think, one of the things that I found with the public historians and the docents and the guides and all these folks I spoke to is that there has to be a balance between extending grace and generosity and then demanding accountability and responsibility, right? Which is to say
it again.
There has to be a balance between extending grace and generosity and then demanding accountability and responsibility. So like, when I go to Whitney Plantation and I'm talking to Yvonne or any of the guides there, if you show up, they're not going to judge you for what you don't know or be condescending toward you for what you don't know. But once they share this information with you, there is the expectation that you are going to sit with that. You have the responsibility to let that settle over you, to let that wash over you, even if it is profoundly jarring and unsettling. And I think that part of what your film is doing is it does the same thing because you are also offering yourself as like, I wasn't always here where I am, right? Like it took me a while. Like I've been on my own journey of figuring this out. And I think that allows for people to come into the film to say like, okay, I might not have known a lot of this stuff before, but CJ also didn't know a lot of this stuff before. And so now,
and we saw him not knowing it on camera.
We saw
right?
it.
Like we saw that pathetic picture of him with the blonde hair, right?
And that's I think that's so, it's so important, and I think it did a lot of great work in the film. Another thing I want to talk about too is we both spent time thinking about the 1811 slave revolt, and I will always remember Dred Scott and the other organizers of the reenactment of the 1811 slave revolt, which for folks who don't know is the largest slave revolt in American history, although it doesn't always get the same level of attention as some other more famous revolts or the attention that it deserves. And there was this big reenactment a few years ago that I really wanted to go to, but I think my kid had just been born, and so like I was just on the floor with spit up all over me. But you did go, and it's a really powerful part of the film, and I'm wondering if we can show that with my
and to set it up, a clip that you will not see is it is the end of the film, or the penultimate scene in the film, because we've already spent time at a Civil War reenactment with all white Civil War reenactors in the South who are saying that this war wasn't about slavery, and the slavery thing has nothing to do with, there's no conversation about it in any of their reenacting. And to them, slavery was a pretty good time, ruined by Harriet Beecher Stowe, who gave slavery a bad name. But yeah, when we learned that,
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Oh my God, can you imagine all the subgroup in America who's still hung up on Uncle Tom's Cabin? But yeah, this reenactment ends the film because it had been the first thing that I had known about that was inverting that story and being like, hey, all these people who you say were having a good time in slavery, why did 500 of them rise up and try to kill you in 1811? Call the clip.
Magic finger. I'll try the other finger.
Yeah. The 1811 uprising clip.
Maybe if I use two.
Oh no, guys. I'm so sorry. Did you ask for it? a
Yeah,
video?
the 1811 uprising clip.
Okay, my internet crashed. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
You're like, I'm just coming back. I'm just logging into Zoom.
The 1811 uprising.
I've always thought of slavery as
Oh,
That's perfect.
that was great. Okay, I apologize.
I've always thought of slavery as this piece missing in white people's memory, which is why it's hard to hear that that piece might also be missing from me. That those of us descended from the enslaved, some of us who have fashioned identities out of remembering the whips and the dogs and the swamps, that even we have only ever heard a fraction of our own story.
It's been more than 200 years since a group of enslaved black men and women launched an uprising in modern-day St. John the Baptist Parish, Louisiana. Many were captured and convicted of insurrection. But now, 2 centuries later, an artist has staged his own version of that fateful event.
Thank you all for showing up. This is a difficult, durational performance that's deeply engaged with the ideas of the revolt of 1811. Self-determination in that era is something that people have written out, but black people had the most radical ideas of freedom at the time.
To me, it feels like sometimes a lot of being black is about remembering pain and wearing that pain and recalling that pain.
Accept your blackness, see the history of your blackness, see what these white people have done to us.
It is a freeing thing to be able to look at that history in a positive way, in a way that feels like, no, we were agents of change as well.
Marching in an army of black rebels, I realize how long I've been spending doing the opposite. I feel blackest when I'm chasing white supremacists. Like I'm somehow earning my spot anytime I put myself in danger or dive back in history to dig up the evidence. But the power I feel in this moment has nothing to do with staring at whiteness. It comes from being able to see myself outside of that chase.
Yeah, I mean, I do this thing when we're with students of saying, I want to see how many people we can name who were enslaved people who fought for their own freedom.
Hmm.
I want you to raise your hand, and the only rule is that you cannot repeat someone else is what someone else said.
Hmm.
And we'll get 2 in. Someone will go Frederick Douglass, someone will go Harriet Tubman, and then there'll be a pause. And then the other day, a young woman said, someone truth. I don't remember her first name. And then someone will go, John Brown. And then it's just a swamp of silence and murmurs of, I know there's another one. And to me, this scene is that, right? Like this scene is us imagining what the education system would be if we actually learned about the millions of enslaved people who took their freedom in their own hands.
Yeah.
And for me, like, so much of the film is about the empty space of the Confederacy, right? This like void that the Confederacy has left in our history, and the void that they've left in our public spaces by placing white supremacy in the middle of the town square. The highest symbols in New Orleans for 130 years have been the Confederacy, a place that, you know, has created some of the most incredible cultural things in America. It's a void, the Confederacy. But this scene was important for me in the film because it was like, what does positive space look like? What does it look like, rather than just being like, the Confederacy is a lie, look at them lying on paper? Being like, what is it actually, what do we do instead of calling the Confederacy a lie? And how do we call that a lie in a way that allows us to see ourselves? And it's like, yeah, when you have 500 black reenactors moving through the streets with canes, swords, and knives, reenacting the people who really tried to do that, I think it calls the Confederacy a lie, but also shows us who we were. That the Confederacy is powerful because it erased all memory of that.
The whole scene is just so powerful. And we only have a few minutes left. If anybody has any last minute questions, throw them into the comment section of whichever space, Facebook, YouTube, or otherwise that you're watching on. One thing that Cheryl asked is, how do you keep your composure when interviewing these different groups of people? We didn't show a clip of the of you at the Confederate reenactment, which is, you know, you gotta watch the movie. You gotta watch the movie.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorites. But what's your disposition when you go there? Like, how do you keep your cool? What are you thinking? Like, what are those like moments?
I mean, this is gonna ruin it, but like, I want to live. So that's like the number one thing. And I'm sure, you know, this felt similar for you in being in some spaces that, you know, when you are in spaces that have notes of white supremacy, your first thing is, I want to be safe.
Yeah.
And then your next thing is, I want to be believed. And then your next thing is, and I want whatever sample I come back with to be untainted. And I was explaining this to some students the other day too about, yeah, we live in a world where when you come back with a sample of white supremacy, people will tell you, that's not real. You mix that with your own bias, or you took that out of context. So part of why I am keeping my composure is not only because I want to feel safe and I want the scene to continue and be able to continue that access of talking to this person, but I want to make sure that when it is coming back, you feel like the sample is uncut, that when you're watching Thomas Taylor say, yes, except when, you know, the objects are people and those things, you notice that they are just long shots on the person. There is no even accusation that we cut it in a way because you're watching sort of an extended cut. So I think that is part of it's not me being like, got to keep a straight face. It is like, how do we come back and have the thing that we bring back most believable? But, you know, even there are folks who are so into white supremacy that they'll never believe that, but students will believe it. And the 15-year-old versions of us will be like, thank you. I knew it's a lie. And I just needed someone to affirm that that is in fact a lie.
Right.
So to me, that's the biggest takeaway, that it's like, we're not going to convince any white supremacists that the thing they're doing is actually wrong. But I think we can pin down reality for young people now and show them that the questions that they have about the past are valid and are real and should be legal. And if there's one thing we're doing with the film, like I want it to be that. I don't think that we're going to get any Green Book moments of like, I guess I was a white supremacist. But I think it opens up a space for students to be like, dang, I can do that too. I can do a paper like that. Or, you know, even the style of your book, I can interview my own grandparents about what race was like when they grow up. And I think if we can open a space like that for young folks, that is a much more transformative model than us being like, do white people believe us yet?
Yeah. It's I think that's a good place to end. This has been such a good conversation. If you don't know, this is going to be on streaming platforms available January 1st. So we're only a couple weeks out. Get ready. Make it
Get
your
ready.
New Year's. This is going to be your New Year's activity. Get your beans and your collard greens and
start cooking now.
Start cooking. Get prepared. Don't be too hungover. And use this moment as the way you open up. This is it to commemorate the day the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect.
Yeah, let's go.
Watch The Neutral Ground. So CJ,
Clint,
man, incredible film. So proud of you.
Clint, I can't thank you enough. Is there a way that folks can be supporting you and looking out for your work right now?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could lift up a version of my book.
I got you.
There we go. I've been sending them all to all my family members. Like, I need a book. Yeah. So How the Word is Passed out, available wherever books are sold. But more importantly, The Neutral Ground. You know, it's watch it, share it, discuss it.
Yeah.
It's so
and
good.
And if you want, if you're trying to teach the film, holler at us at the website, neutralgroundfilm.com. Academy members, it's in the AMPAS portal. You can check that. Everyone else, you can see it on January 1st. Thank you so much, Clint. You make me feel like the things I think are real and like the questions I have are worthy. And thank you for doing that work for so many other people. Thank you, Black Public Media, for giving us this space. And everyone have a good night. Go tell the truth.
I just wanted to hop in real quick. Thank you both. Thank you so much for your insight and this time you're giving us and for the work each of you have put in to educate us and to empower our community. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to send you guys off as I wrap up. But thank you, CJ and Clint, so much.
Thanks, Ebony.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for watching this evening, for taking a part in this conversation. If you want to stay up to date with the work that Black Public Media is doing, follow us at Black Public Media on Instagram and Facebook, and you can subscribe to our newsletter at blackpublicmedia.org. Thank you again for sharing this hour with us. Have a restful and wonderful rest of your night. Bye.